Hey guys, so while we're getting started and waiting for everyone to join, I'm just going to throw up that disclaimer, which is that everything that's said today, remember, is just for education and inspiration. Obviously, it's your job to apply it to your own situation, to do your own research, and in the end, make decisions for yourself. We're not treating, we're not diagnosing, we're not prescribing, we're just chatting. And of course, everything I say is speculation because I don't know your specific case. And so I'm not, gonna say you should take this or you should take this because I don't know if you should. And that's not good for me or for you. So I'll do the best I can, but always just kind of keep that in mind that this is kind of going to be a little bit more general than advice you would get one-on-one. All right, thank you guys so much for being here. I know the world's really crazy right now, so I guess what better to do than to sit down and just kind of chat about our health. So the Holistic Mother says, "Hi Jess, thank you for being amazing. I'm an FN. Oh yay. Thoughts on why nutritional yeast might cause gas? I have Cerebrand, super clean and unfortified. Would brewers yeast be the same?" Sometimes people are sensitive to it. It can be slightly irritating, especially if there's already gut issues going on. That is a possibility. Sometimes just lowering your dose or lowering your intake of it at first and allowing your body to get used to it can be helpful, but some people are just really sensitive to it. So, most foods are good for most people, but then sometimes people's gut is in a specific place where it just can't handle certain foods, and it doesn't mean like force it. It just means maybe do a little bit more healing work and then add it in again and see if you can tolerate it again. But yeah, yeast can sometimes be irritating for some people or give people bloating or gas when the gut's already kind of a little bit imbalanced, or if they're just sensitive to that yeast. Also, keep in mind, what is it grown on? Because nutritional yeast and brewer's yeast are cultivated on different things. So the nutritional yeast and the brewer's yeast that I specifically recommend in Fully Nourished is Blue Bonnet, and I know that they grow that yeast on non-GMO sugar beets. And I don't know what the Cerebrand is grown on, but they can grow it on wheat, they can grow it on oats, they can grow it on just about anything, genetically modified corn. So make sure you know what your yeast is grown on, because there can be leftover residue from those things. Do you take Shilajit on an empty stomach? Normally I do, just because it's really easy to dissolve under my tongue right when I wake up. And yes, so yeah, it's usually taken on an empty stomach. But with anything, some people can't handle certain things on an empty stomach. And if you're really sensitive to it on an empty stomach, it's totally fine to take it with food as well. Do we need to add more fiber in our diet for proper estrogen detox? If so, what are good sources of fiber? Personally, I don't think so. Sometimes fiber can actually slow things down. I'm a big fan of fruits, cooked fruits, like applesauce, for example. You're taking apples, you're cooking them down. Pear sauce, you're taking pears, you're cooking them down. Stewing things like kiwis, making jams and jellies. Those are really easy to digest fibers. I really like root vegetables and squashes. Again, they add bulk without adding irritation. And then for some people can do really well cooked greens as long as they're cooked in a saturated fat like lard or duck fat or coconut oil or grass-fed butter or ghee. And then some people will do the occasional cruciferous vegetable. I really go by my cravings. I don't make myself eat a cruciferous vegetable unless I truly want it. I probably haven't eaten a cruciferous vegetable after I went keto for I didn't eat a cruciferous vegetable, I think, for 8 months. I literally wanted to barf every time I thought about eating them. But then, last week I was feeling some Brussels sprouts, so I had, I almost burnt them to a crisp in the oven and had some Brussels sprouts. But I don't think fiber is a necessary addition. We need to find the right fiber amounts for us, but proper detoxification of estrogen requires proper metabolic function and proper thyroid function. Remember, the thyroid really regulates how we detoxify estrogen in the liver. Our protein intake is going to really affect that. So remember, phase 2 in the liver requires protein, specifically amino acids like glycine and glutamine, and then phase 1 requires things like vitamin E, vitamin C, B vitamins, and so it's mostly about nutrients when it comes to estrogen detox, and actually very little about fiber. Raw carrot fiber, though, is king when it comes to binding to estrogen and carrying it out of the gut. If the phase 3 detoxification of estrogen or the gut phase of estrogen detoxification is messed up, then the raw carrot is helpful. Sometimes mushrooms, the addition of well-cooked mushrooms is also necessary. Bamboo shoots can also be a great kind of like supplementary fiber, but usually getting the metabolism functioning is going to support estrogen detoxification. Thoughts on chlorella and spirulina? I'm not a fan of chlorella just because it's really high iron content, but I do like spirulina. It just really depends on sourcing, as do all things, so you want to make sure it's sourced properly. But yeah, spirulina can be really nutrient dense. It's very rich in certain minerals, potassium, sodium. It has some selenium in it, and I personally just don't like it, so I'm not gonna eat it. Like, I don't really think I should force myself to eat something that I can easily get from other foods. Like, I can easily get sodium from other things, I can easily get potassium from other things, selenium from other things, but some people have definitely seen huge results with spirulina, so it is powerful and potent, but I don't think it's like necessary unless you truly enjoy it. Enjoying collagen and gelatin together. Do you mean like you're consuming them together? I don't see a problem why that would. Your sourdough recipe, I made starter, then bread, come out very dense and dry. Any tips? I followed instructions to a T, but starter took almost 2 weeks to start. Is it really cold where you are? Environment totally matters, and sometimes the colder months can kind of get you a denser and drier starter. So your starter should start like within a day. If not, the temperature is too cold. You should really start to see bubbles within 24 hours. What I'll do is I'll take my mason jar. So I put my starter in a mason jar, and I'm going to put it on top of the toaster oven or right next to the toaster oven, and literally throughout the day, if it's a really cold day, I just turn the toaster oven on a couple times a day. Put it on bake or whatever the setting is to just get it really warm, so it's kind of like emanating heat, and my sourdough starter is like, nestled up against my toaster. So that's kind of the way that I've kind of got around it. Some people will say like stick it in your oven with the oven light on. That can really help too. You just want to kind of keep an eye on it, but it does need to be warm enough, or it's going to have a hard time cultivating yeast, or maybe certain yeast will start to grow and other yeast will take some time actually like getting a head start or a jump start. So it might be that the temperature is a little off. Collagen and gelatin in my coffee. Thoughts? I don't see a problem with both. It seems a little slightly excessive, but if you need both, then go for both. High levels of L-lactate. Why? Cure. First of all, I don't talk about the CURE word. Whenever it comes to organic acids being off, it's all about gut bacteria and how your gut's functioning. Personally, whenever someone has carbohydrate metabolism issues, I'm always doing like a spore-based probiotic. We're always testing minerals, making sure that things like magnesium and iodine and selenium and sodium and potassium are balanced. Usually they're not. I'm also making sure that people don't have heavy metal issues, which often they do. So I also like to see a Dutch test. Hormones truly matter. How's the person, what's their history? Are they really poor eaters? Have they eaten tons of polyunsaturated fats? What's their environment like? What has their eating frequency been? There's so many questions when it comes to carbohydrate metabolism, and I never focus on some specific result on a test. If someone has carbohydrate metabolism issues, they most likely have other issues, and instead of focusing on like, how do I do XYZ, remember, the question is never how, guys. It's always why. Why is it high in the first place? And the answer usually lies in many of our lifestyle choices, whether it was a long time ago or right now, and many things that kind of need to be adjusted. But I always look to minerals, I always look to hormones, and I always look to gut health, and that's where we should always start. Is it okay to megadose vitamin C? I can't really say it's okay or not. Everyone's a little different. I don't know what type of vitamin C you're taking. If it's ascorbic acid, I'm not a fan of high amounts of ascorbic acid because oftentimes it's very allergenic. It can kind of encourage like an allergic response because of the processing that it goes through. I personally prefer whole foods vitamin C, but if you want a little bit more information on vitamin C, I do have a full highlight story labeled vitamin C on the benefits of vitamin C and why whole foods might be a little better than a synthetic like ascorbic acid. Should you go easy on root starches if you have gut issues? Everyone's a little different. Usually people with gut issues are going to tend towards constipation, and so that really is kind of your threshold for starches. Oftentimes I have clients who, when they have 2 servings of starch per day, they get constipated, but when they do 1 serving of starch, they're fine. And so then their threshold is 1 serving of starch a day. So it's just kind of very much in context. Some people can handle a couple servings of starch and they're fine. Are you getting endotoxin symptoms? It's very common in the health and wellness world to make problems where there are not problems. We're always so stressed about the details because human beings just love the negative that it's very important to not be that way. If you're not having a problem with something, don't worry about it. Don't change it. If you have really bad gut issues, you're super duper constipated, then experiment with a little less starch and see how you do. Do you feel better? How are your moods? How is your digestion? If it truly doesn't make a difference, then it doesn't make a difference. But it doesn't really matter what I say. Like, there's no amount of rules I could give you that would apply. It's really about experimenting and finding for yourself. For example, for me, I found out that I do not do well on any root vegetables except for potatoes when I have gut issues. And I had to really experiment to figure that out. I can do 2 servings of potatoes a day just fine. And then lots and lots of fruit and I feel fine. But if I do like a serving of grains or a serving of sweet potatoes, oh God help me. So it really is context. There's no rules. It's just about kind of experimenting and finding what is fine for you. But yeah, you know, root vegetables are a starch. So if you have really bad gut issues, you might find that you do better on things like dairy and fruit and not as well on root vegetables. But again, that's kind of relative. How much is too much sugar? I'm loving drinking OJ and eating real ice cream, but can you overdo it with fruit and good sugars? I just don't like that question because it's just like a really wrong way of looking at it. Our body needs adequate carbohydrate and we need to really decide the best place to get them from. So, sugar is sugar. So sucrose is fructose and glucose, meaning that you could get fructose and glucose from a potato and a piece of fruit. You can get fructose and glucose from coconut sugar, you can get it from maple syrup, you can get it from white sugar. You get to decide where it comes from. Some people are going to do better on one and some people are going to do better on the other. But I'm really sick of us asking if, we can overdo it on sugar. Sugar is sugar is sugar in from the point of view as to, would you ever ask like, oh God, am I getting too much root vegetables, or am I getting too much greens, or am I getting too much this? Like your body needs adequate carbohydrates. Most women need anywhere from 200 to 400 grams of carbs a day. And if you do the math and you actually look at how many carbohydrates are in your sugars that you're consuming, you're probably not consuming that much. So I wouldn't really stress too much about it. The biggest thing I would worry about is going from 0 to 100 way too quickly. Many of us are coming from a low carb past, paleo past, keto past, and when someone gives you permission to eat carbohydrates, we just think like, oh, let's pound the carbs. Remember, we should always pair them with protein and a little bit of fat. It always needs to be in relationship to each other. So, just like I emphasize the importance of carbohydrates in Fully Nourished, I also emphasize the importance of protein. I emphasize the importance of the types of fats you're consuming. And so all of it is in context of one another. If you were just pounding orange juice and just pounding ice cream, then that would be a worry. But you're allowed to get your carbs from whatever source you like, and a variety is good. I get ice cream from carbs all the time, or I get carbs from ice cream all the time. I get carbs from OJ all the time. It doesn't matter if I get it from that or a potato. So it's just really important to understand that ice cream is not like more of a devil than a potato and a piece of fruit. Like, they're very similar from a carbohydrate perspective. Hi, I'm curious why my performance in the gym suffers so much the week before my period and how I might combat it. I currently deload that week, go lighter and easier, but wondering if there's more to help. Yeah, minerals sometimes are needed, so like maybe a little bit more magnesium during that time. Like, the body kind of like tries to prepare for this detox. We can kind of think of our period as a depletion, and so the body's really smart, right? And so remember, like, our period, our body knows it can go one of two ways. No egg is implanted into the uterus and we shed that uterine lining, or we actually are going to implant a fertilized egg, and that will be the beginning of our pregnancy. So we always need to keep in mind that our luteal phase, especially the second half, is literally our body preparing for a potential pregnancy. It's thinking like, it's very possible that I'm going to have to start growing a human being. And so keeping that in mind and kind of keeping that mindset, you can kind of see like, oh, the body's probably conserving resources. And so the week before your period specifically, your calorie needs do increase. Your carbohydrate needs increase, your protein needs increase, and then your mineral needs increase. So think like sea salt, coconut water for potassium, and some extra magnesium, and calcium from like Parmesan cheese. So just maybe try to increase calories by a couple hundred calories. Add an extra snack in, maybe add like an extra, if you're eating eggs for breakfast, maybe add an extra egg that week. Or if you're eating some potatoes for breakfast, add a little extra, like half a cup of potatoes. Just kind of make your meals slightly bigger and see if that helps your performance, because oftentimes it's that blood sugar imbalances can start to occur. Often it's actually when someone starts bleeding, but I have seen like a preluteal phase kind of like performance drop. There is a doctor, her name is, I want to say her name is Dr. Stacy Sims, but I might be getting her confused with someone else. She did this TED Talk called Women Are Not Small Men, and I follow her here on Instagram. I can't remember if that's her or not, but she talks a ton about like, she's an athlete, so she talks a ton about like athletic performance based on your cycle. She is very informative in regards to those types of things. She talks about why women should always be running on carbs and not do like keto or fasting or anything like that. So check her stuff out. She might have a little bit more insight on it, but I could see how, the body's really like under a lot of stress during that time, just in preparation mode almost. And I would first try a little bit more calories, specifically protein and carb, and then maybe a little bit more minerals like sodium, magnesium, and potassium. Thoughts on fibromyalgia? What about chronic fatigue syndrome? How can these be fixed with functional nutrition, not meds? Fibromyalgia is just a major amount of fibrosis in the body, in my opinion. People with fibromyalgia have had like inflammation and fibrotic tissue buildup over time. Oftentimes, people with fibromyalgia also have lots of like trauma, which really can store physically in the body. But yeah, it can take a while, but fibromyalgia, at least like with clients, regardless of if they're on meds or not, as long as their doctor's okay with it, we'll do things like fascia work or body work, like a fascia blaster. We'll look at like things like proteolytic enzymes to break down scar tissue, and like I said, lots of body work. And then calcification is something to keep in mind. So if there's like low magnesium or vitamin K is low, or there's gut issues, those are all going to affect the body as a whole. That's going to affect how our tissues move, because remember, tissues are made up of cells, and so if our cells aren't functioning properly, our cells aren't going to be moving properly or functioning alongside of each other properly. So that's kind of my take on fibromyalgia. I have a couple clients that have fibromyalgia, so that's kind of our approach. And then chronic fatigue syndrome, anything can cause chronic fatigue, from major amounts of trauma and stress to heavy metals to like Lyme's disease to Epstein-Barr to hypothyroidism to, there's so many things that can cause chronic fatigue. And oftentimes I've had multiple clients that have been diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome where their doctor hasn't explored any other reasons why they could have chronic fatigue. It's really just unexplained fatigue. And so it just really bothers me because I'm like, what if someone has a real reason that's driving their chronic fatigue and it's just kind of being ignored? So that's kind of my take for chronic fatigue. I'm not saying it shouldn't be treated with meds. I'm just saying that there could be another reason why the body is chronically fatigued, which I think is kind of a weird cop-out. Asked already, but IDK if I missed it. Saw palmetto does wonders for my acne, 0 breakouts, how to heal with food naturally. Breakouts started after antibiotics and Epstein-Barr 3 years ago. How to heal with food naturally. Oftentimes it's liver stress and gut stress because it, obviously it started after antibiotics. So if saw palmetto helps, it helps. Oftentimes I've just seen a lot of damage done with saw palmetto, so that's why it's definitely not an herb that I mess around with. But some people really do see benefits from it. When it comes to food and naturally, I'm usually, it's so hard. That's such a broad spectrum for me to talk about, but really high quality protein, making sure we're getting 100 grams of bioavailable animal proteins daily, getting our carbohydrate from nutrient-dense sources like roots and fruits, avoiding tons of phytoestrogenic, gut-irritating foods like nuts and seeds, tons of raw vegetables, raw greens, tons of cruciferous vegetables, and then making sure that we're focusing in on gut health. Things like spore-based probiotics can sometimes help, raw carrot salad can sometimes help, and then definitely a lot of liver support. So things like, nutrient-dense foods like grass-fed beef liver and oysters are so excellent, but then also sometimes people need extra support. So every acne situation is different, which is why a lot of times people end up working one-on-one with me for their acne because everyone is having their acne driven by different things. I mean, I could do all the guessing in the world, but I don't know what's driving someone's acne until we start to explore health history and look at minerals and look at hormones and stuff like that. But have you ever done a Dutch test? Because maybe testosterone's going down the wrong pathway or something like that. Hands and feet extremely cold while face and ears extremely hot and red. Is it a histamine issue? I don't know if it's a histamine issue, but it sounds like it could possibly be a histamine issue. Remember, for hands or feet are always cold, it's a sign of a low metabolism, lots of stress hormones, and that can increase histamine and increase inflammation. So it can be multiple things. It can be lots of stress, lots of inflammation, which can absolutely be histamine, drive histamine. What are some natural ways to stabilize high androgens? And we really want to focus in on liver health, and we want to focus in on things that are going to produce and promote progesterone. We also need to keep in mind our estrogen levels, because oftentimes people with high testosterone are telling me, oh, my estrogen is normal. And I say, well, remember that estrogen can turn into testosterone. The body can aromatize estrogen into testosterone and testosterone into estrogen all of the time. And so this happens a lot, especially in the gut. And so when people have high androgens, I definitely focus in on the gut as well. Raw carrot salad every single day. Sometimes a Just Thrive probiotic can be very, very helpful. Vitamin K2 is also very supportive of both the liver and also helping stabilize androgens. Remember that vitamin K2 is synthesized or made in the gut by gut bacteria. And if our guts are unruly, we're going to usually have low vitamin K. And a lot of people who have high androgens or PCOS or acne are being told to not eat dairy and to switch it out with a bunch of estrogenic foods like nut milks and things like that. And they're just adding more processed food into their diet, more plant estrogens, and they're skipping out on those incredible primal fat-soluble vitamins. Oftentimes people are switching for these plant-based alternatives made in a laboratory, made in a factory, and they're no longer getting vitamin A from a retinol source, or vitamin K, or vitamin D, or vitamin E from from animal sources. They're now getting like synthetic fortified versions of these things, or missing out on them altogether, and that's horrible for detoxification and hormone production. So that's a long way of saying, like, really truly eat real food. And I know a lot of people say, like, oh, I'm on a whole foods plant-based diet, and I'm like, well, how many foods are actually being manufactured for you, and how much junk is in your food? Start looking at the ingredients in your food as well, because those gums and things are going to really burden the liver and burden the gut and cause more a cascade of more hormone problems rather than less. And this is really what my program Fully Nourished talks about. Inositol plus birth control together makes sense. I don't know if that makes sense. I'm not a doctor, so I don't give really any recommendations regarding birth control. Thoughts on mushroom powders like Four Sigmatic and Laird. I'm not really sure about Laird. I'm not familiar with that brand, so I don't know about their practices. Four Sigmatic, again, I think that they source their mushrooms from China. I'm not sure, but I just would sometimes second guess them, and I know their products are very expensive, but sometimes the mushroom sources are not good. The only mushrooms that I personally use are Sun Potion, because I know that they are actually sourced from the right place, and like a high quality place. Or sometimes like mushroom extracts. For example, I use like a supplement like BioRay Liver Tonic Support, and that has like some extracts of mushrooms and stuff like that. But I know that those are pure, and they're not actually like being grown on things that might not be very good for you. I think I heard in My Life podcast interview with Kate Deering that bone marrow has a lot of iron, and that's bad for copper, right? So how do you make bone broth without bone marrow? You don't. And I wouldn't really stress about like small little things like that. You can easily use like the knuckle bones, which just have less marrow, or you can use chicken feet, which oftentimes bone broth is made with chicken feet, and chicken feet are very gelatinous, and there's no bones in them. Like chicken backs and things like that can be used, turkey necks, chicken necks, things like that. So you can always make like chicken bone broth that's very rich in gelatin, or use like knuckle bones, or oxtail is another really easy gelatinous source for bone broth or broth if you're like super worried about the iron content. I currently take folic acid prescribed, and I'm looking for alternative natural way to increase it so I can ditch that pill. Did you need the folate? It's like one of those things where if it's prescribed, it's very important to take it with like kind of alongside of what your doctor has said. If you want something a little bit more natural, just make sure you clear it. Sometimes doctors will prescribe something for a very specific reason, and it's not, they know more about what's going on with you than I do. But sometimes like a methylfolate, I've had clients that ask their doctor about taking a methylated folate, like Geros or something, and as long as their doctor clears it, they're good to go. But yeah, there are other alternatives to like a folic acid. Thought on Restore, the lignite extract liquid for gut health. Yeah, I mean, it's just like fulvic humic substances. It's somebody that was really, really marketing savvy, probably took something that has been around forever and put it in like a fancy bottle and upsold the shit out of it. And then they're like, haha, it's really good for gut health. But like fulvic humic substances have been around for a long time. I still remember them at the health food store, like in the early 2000s and the 90s. It's like this yellow bottle. It looks like really old, like it was literally made in the 90s, and it's probably half the price. Personally, I just prefer Shilajit for that because it's easier to take, and it's just as gut supportive. But personally, I've taken Restore when I was scammed by it years ago, and I've had clients that take it. I think it's just literally fulvic humic substances. Everyone can take vitamin E without testing levels first. It's just very important to check with your doctor, or at least look in the context of your health. It does have blood thinning effects. It can interact with certain medications. So again, like you kind of need to take your own case and not just like supplement it because someone on the internet said. But most people do need vitamin E. The more polyunsaturated fats we eat, or the more polyunsaturated fats that are in our tissues that are coming out of our tissues, like let's say we're losing weight and we're overweight, usually the higher our vitamin E needs are. But again, like I can't say everyone can take vitamin E because that's not true. But most people do well with it. What's your take on histamine intolerance? I feel like I react to high histamine foods. Can this be rectified? I hate being scared of cheese and yogurt. Yeah, histamine intolerance is kind of, I feel like, a little bit misleading. It's not histamine intolerance, it's just a histamine issue. Someone's not clearing histamine well because they have other issues going on. Oftentimes it's a vitamin C issue, vitamin B6 issue, but biggest of all, it's a magnesium deficiency. So if you have never looked into hair tissue mineral analysis or mineral balancing, I highly recommend maybe listening to a few podcasts by Morley Robbins to get started. He's kind of like the king of magnesium, and he has a few podcasts that he's done with other people talking about like copper and histamine issues. But copper issues and histamine issues really go hand in hand, and so oftentimes when somebody has like really bad histamine issues, they have gut issues going on, but it does have a lot to do with minerals like copper and magnesium. What's the deal with DHA and DHEA if not taking cod liver oil? Maybe like you were meaning like DHA and EPA. I personally don't think that they're essential at all. And honest to God truth, like there are so many studies showing that having less DHA actually makes women like more fertile and less inflamed and live longer and things like that. So personally, I think that it's all a scam. Like when it comes to like fish oils and things like that, scam. We get enough in our food. Like we're getting exposed to plenty of them. We don't need to supplement them. Like that's ridiculous. Why would collagen protein cause gas and breakouts, and why would gelatin be better? I think I've heard you say, but please correct me if I'm wrong. Remember that collagen is processed, and so whenever you're processing a protein, there are natural MSGs are formed. Now, a lot of people are like, oh my god, MSG, like, and I'm like, it's not like MSG, like monosodium glutamate that's been produced. It's natural occurring MSG that happens from processing of protein. It's a natural byproduct of processing protein. There could be possibly MSG in there. And so anytime you process something, you have that chance that some people are not going to react to it very well, especially if they're sensitive, if their gut's really irritated, their guts not loving certain things. Collagen can be a problem for some people, and so doing the unprocessed form of it, gelatin, tends to be much better. But gelatin can be very hard to digest if you do not bloom it properly. So make sure you're blooming your gelatin, which simply is just adding some hot water with your gelatin in like a hot mug or something, mixing it up, letting it kind of bloom and gelatinize for 10-20 minutes, and then putting it into your recipe. You can easily Google blooming gelatin and you'll find so much information on it. But I know a lot of people out there will say that collagen is processed and so people tend to tolerate it better. I don't see the mentality there. Collagen can be not tolerated by some people because it is processed. Personally, that's what I think. And I do think it's the way it's processed. If you're getting really low quality collagen, you'll probably tolerate it a lot less than a higher quality processed collagen. Does dry brushing really work? How long does one need to do it per day? Yeah, I mean, all body work, all stimulation of the lymph system is really, really good is really, really good. Does it work? Work for what? I don't know. It doesn't work for anything. We do these things to kind of add to our health and wellness bank account. We're in a world that we're exposed to stressors constantly. EMFs, Wi-Fi, toxic water, toxic air, toxic foods. We slather toxic products on our body. And so anything that we can do to give our body a leg up, awesome. We also like sit in our chairs all day. We're really stagnant. We're really sedentary. We're not walking the 10,000 to 15,000 steps our ancestors did every single day. They moved, they squatted, they leaned down, they picked things up. We're not doing those primal movements any longer. And so anything that we can do to move ourselves, work on fibrotic tissue, work on our lymphatic system is definitely a good thing, especially if you're a very sedentary person, you don't move, you're not active, you're not doing different things, hiking, walking, getting outside every day and exercising, then yeah, we definitely should be doing something that's going to stimulate the movement of our lymphatic system, because stagnant interstitial fluid is not a good idea if we're not really moving a lot. Do raw carrots give the same benefits as eating baby carrots? I never recommend eating baby carrots. Remember, guys, carrots don't grow in little babies. They take this is going to gross you out and probably ruin your baby carrot love forever. But remember, guys, baby carrots are simply just the deformed carrots that they've taken, they've processed, they've ground up, and then they've reformed into a baby carrot and soaked in chlorine to keep it together and to keep it from rotting. Remember that carrots naturally have an outer layer that actually protects them from bacteria and fermentation, but once you take that layer off and you process them, you cut them up, they will get bad over time. And so that's why baby carrots are don't look like a big carrot, because they don't grow as babies, guys. They're processed into baby carrots. So personally, I would never touch a baby carrot with a 10-foot pole that is like a literal manufactured item. I would just eat a regular carrot that was grown from the ground, and I took it from the ground and I ate it straight. But yes, raw carrot fiber is important, but I don't recommend processed carrot fiber. Why would we take vitamin E if it's derived from high PUFA foods? I understand PUFAs aren't in the supplement, but wondering if shouldn't we just eat the food it comes from? If you can get nuts and seeds that are collected from the source, so for example, the wild, remember nuts and seeds should come in their shell, the organically and wild forage, then I highly recommend getting it from the source. But good luck doing that. That is the only time when we can get access to non-rancid nuts and seeds, is when they are provided to us in the form that nature provides them to us. And unfortunately, we live in a world where things are very processed. Even your whole natural foods that you buy at Whole Foods are still very processed, and nuts and seeds specifically are very susceptible to oxidation and going rancid. And so by the time you actually get your nuts and seeds, their polyunsaturated fats have already gone rancid because they've been exposed to light and oxygen and air. And so, yeah, in a perfect world, we would get plenty of vitamin E from the foods that we eat. Also, keep in mind, animals are no longer wild. They're no longer foraging and eating nuts and seeds, and that vitamin E is no longer in their tissues because they're not eating nuts and seeds. Remember, we would get access to vitamin E in our meats if our meat was wild and those animals were actually foraging for those foods. We're no longer getting access to that either. So remember, guys, we no longer live in the environment that our ancestors lived in, and so we sometimes do have to supplement foods in order to get these nutrients that we can no longer get in nature in the right way. So yeah, in a perfect world, we would get our vitamin E from meats, from animals that were consuming nuts and seeds in the wild and foraging foods that were rich in vitamin E, and we would get them from whole forms of nuts and seeds. But it's very difficult to find that in our modern landscape. Suggestions for preventing or curing UTIs. when it comes to recurring UTIs, meaning that, they're recurrent, they keep coming back, we have a bacteria issue. A lot of times it does stem from the gut, but personally, the best thing that we can do to support our urinary tract is cranberries. Cranberry juice, cranberry sauce. It actually has a substance in it called diagnose, which stops bacteria from being able to, dig their claws into the membranes of our urinary tract. So as a preventative measure for UTIs, I always will eat like a tablespoon of cranberry sauce or add it to one of my meals or something like that, or I'll add cranberry concentrate to some sparkling water and have it every day just to really support the health of my urinary tract. But then I also do take like a Just Thrive probiotic. I eat my raw carrot daily. Like I do take measures to keep my gut really healthy, and it has really kept UTIs at bay for me. Thoughts on phytoestrogens topically to increase breast size. People say they can help hormones, but you seem to be against phytoestrogens altogether. Yeah, I don't know why we would do that. I just don't understand it. What we're doing is when we are increasing our breast size with estrogen, we're making our breast tissue more fibrocystic, dense, and we're kind of, hurting our breast tissue or inflaming it in order to get our boobs bigger. That's why we're getting our boobs bigger when we supplement estrogen. I remember the reason why I'm not like against estrogens, I just focus on the research, and the research is really terrifying, and nobody's talking about it. I personally, before I knew what I know now, went to a functional medicine doctor who said I had low estrogen. This is what really started my research cascade. And I was on supplemental estrogen for 6 to 8 months, and my boobs did get bigger for sure. They were also heavy and dense and uncomfortable and almost painful. I had horrible periods. I had, horrible PMS symptoms. And so just because my boobs were bigger didn't mean they were healthier. And we have to keep in mind, we're a culture so obsessed with how the size of our breasts that we're forgetting like the health of our breasts are so much more important than the size of our breasts. So many women right now, we should really take a lesson from all the women having to get their breast implants removed, that messing with our breasts always comes with a consequence. Always, because our breasts are made for specific reasons, and if we start messing with them for cosmetic reasons, there's usually a consequence to pay. Infradian rhythm. I don't know what the infradian rhythm is. Maybe circadian rhythm. Are canned oysters as healthy as raw? Any thoughts on oyster powder? My child won't eat oysters. It's one of those things where we shouldn't force a new food if they don't like them. Are you rinsing them off? Are you squeezing them with lime? Are you maybe trying them in something? I've never heard of powdered oysters, or oyster powder, but I'm sure it does exist. And I don't know what the processing is. You can always call the company and say, hey guys, how do you process your oysters? It just takes a little bit of some common sense and just asking the questions that we need to ask. How do you actually make your oyster powder? And do you do any weird practices? Do you, just let them explain their process. And a lot of times, you can say like, oh, you just dry them out and grind them up. Awesome. Or they'll say like, oh, we put them in this chemical vat and we let them sit there, and you're like, oh, okay. So it doesn't take much to figure out if something like that is good for you or not. But canned oysters are fine. Raw oysters are fine. It's really about however you can get them in. And I really don't worry too much about method, because the method doesn't matter as much as just the delivery. Do you ever get the temp drop? If so, do you like it? I didn't, because I just kind of decided it's not like an extra thing I want to do before bed, and I couldn't really get any clear. I know that it doesn't emit Bluetooth all night, but I couldn't get a clear answer as to if it does emit Bluetooth a lot. Like, I just couldn't get a clear answer, so I haven't tried it yet. It's something that I kind of want to try, but I did so many gadgets and different new things last year, I just didn't want to add another thing to my routine, but it is something I would like to add. I know you talk about iron and acne. Is cooking in cast iron a problem? It sometimes can be. But again, it's always in context. If someone already came into cooking with cast iron with iron poisoning because they grew up eating fortified iron-rich foods, and remember, most of our Cheerios had like 700% the amount of daily iron we needed, and then we ate that every single day. We can do the math. So it really just depends. Some people are fine. They're getting plenty of vitamin C in their diet. They're getting plenty of nutrients that help them process iron, but some people really do have livers and kidneys that are really backed up with iron, and any additional iron causes them a problem. So I like to say, like, no, cast iron isn't a problem, but for some people it actually really is. So it's important to kind of look at context. Can strong antibiotics cause disruption in your hormones or PCOS? I can't say yes or no, but yeah, I could see how it could definitely affect hormones because it's affecting the gut bacteria. It's affecting something called the estrobolome, which is, remember, we have a microbiome, a specific balance of gut bacteria in the digestive tract. And then when we wipe them out with antibiotics, we're creating space. Antibiotics create space. And so when we create space, the bacteria that remain are going to really race to try to re-inoculate the gut. And so sometimes after antibiotics, we create a whole new microbiome. And the microbiome also includes the estrobolome. And the estrobolome is how estrogens are actually broken down and carried out by the body. It starts in the liver, but then it ends in the gut. And so absolutely it can affect, if we do, theoretically, if we do like a strong round of antibiotics, we're wiping out a lot of bacteria that might be helping us carry out certain hormones properly. And so if, we created it, if different bacteria kind of came in and took up residence and the estrobolome changed, then absolutely our hormones can function completely different post-antibiotic. And it might not show up right away. It might take like 6 months to a year to really like start to see like, wow, my hormones are way different post-antibiotic. If I have low iron and I'm taking iron supplements, should I complement with other vitamin mineral supplements to not deplete other vitamin stores? If you have low iron, you really need to, I encourage you to listen to Morley Robbins and understand that oftentimes low iron actually has nothing to do with low iron and has everything to do with magnesium and copper. It's a very common thing that I see, and iron supplements internally can really mess with the digestive tract. I usually encourage clients that are on iron supplements to ask or clear iron patches or transdermal patches with their doctor instead. Those are just kind of things to research and look into. But yeah, Morley Robbins is a really great resource for talking about iron. Tips for high estrogen. Yeah, I mean, pretty much everything I talk about here. Get enough protein, 100 grams of bioavailable animal protein every single day. Stop eating so many estrogenic foods like nuts and seeds. Polyunsaturated fats definitely need to be avoided, like canola oil and soybean oil and stuff like that. Making sure we're getting plenty of carbohydrates from roots and fruits. Raw carrot salad every single day because carrot fiber really binds to estrogen very, very well. And then making sure our minerals are balanced. So we want to make sure our magnesium levels are good, sodium levels are good, potassium levels are good. And then also a Dutch test is a really great resource because it tells you how your hormones are breaking down and how they're being detoxified from the body. Phase 1 detoxification in the liver, phase 2 detoxification in the liver. And different phases require different nutrients. So phase 1 requires things like vitamin E and vitamin C and B vitamins, whereas phase 2 requires lots and lots of protein and amino acids. And then the gut is really important when it comes to estrogen detoxification too. So the biggest tips though are get lots of carbs from roots and fruits, make sure we're keeping our blood sugar balanced by eating a snack every 3 to 4 hours, make sure we're getting 100 grams of protein per day, and eating a raw carrot or a raw carrot salad every day. Bone broth suggestions. I made a few times and it always smells so good but barely tastes like anything. I'll add salt like a lot and it's still so bland. Yeah, what you can do is saute like onions and garlic. like in butter or lard before you start everything up, and then you can like fill the pot up, do the bones and everything, and throw in like carrots, and you can do chives, you can do leeks, you can do lots of like flavorful things that are gonna add umami. And then do you add your splash of apple cider vinegar or vinegar to pull the nutrients from the bones? Because that will be a big factor as well. But if it tastes bland, you can always add more spices. You can blend it with some stuff. So usually I'll use it as a base, and I'll actually like steam, squash or steam sweet potato or steam potato, throw it on a blender with spices and some collagen, and that will be like a snack because it makes this like thick, creamy soup that's really, really good. It works well with like onions and garlic and asparagus as well. Do you have any suggestions for preventing neurodegenerative diseases? I can't say like preventing, but we can look at the things that possibly encourage neurodegenerative diseases, like polyunsaturated fat consumption, heavy metal exposure. So making sure like our minerals are balanced, we get plenty of magnesium, sodium, potassium. We deal with any heavy metal exposure or heavy metal issues we could possibly have. We make sure our diets are free of those nasty fats like canola and soybean oil. We make sure we're eating plenty of protein. Remember, our brains do run on glucose, so make sure we're using glucose well by having good thyroid function, good progesterone levels. We're detoxifying estrogen well. Our liver and our gut are happy. Everything that I talk about here, guys, applies to health in general. Any disease is a disease of the body. It's years and years and years of abuse that is finally caught up and is starting to show symptoms. It takes some time for that to happen. And so what we do now affects us later. And those things don't just automatically like pop up. They've slowly developed over time. Terrible acne breakouts since the beginning of the quarantine. Tips for keeping hormones balanced at home. Are you, is your air clean? Are you opening your windows, airing things out? Remember, indoor air is way more polluted than outdoor air. And so, that's something to kind of keep in mind. We don't want air just sitting there. Ugh, so gross. Maybe make sure there's plants. Consider like a HEPA filter. It could totally be the air. Also consider doing a raw carrot every single day. I always love doing a raw carrot because it kind of helps keep my gut balanced. And then, are you stressed out? Those are kind of things to think about. Are you super stressed out? And is that maybe causing the breakouts? Because under a lot of stress, we'll definitely see ourselves breaking out a lot more. Vital Proteins collagen. I like Vital Proteins or Great Lakes. So I usually use Great Lakes, but a lot of people like Vital Proteins. So can you put gelatin in cold drinks like the Calm Creamsicle somehow? Yeah, not really, because it's going to gelatinize. So maybe make some Calm Creamsicle Jello or Calm Creamsicle gummies and do it that way. Or just omit the Calm Creamsicle for now and use a different snack until you can tolerate collagen, or if you can tolerate collagen. You can also do a bone broth protein powder, Paleo Valley has a good one that's dairy-free, or you can do casein protein if that's something that you can tolerate. Is the sensitivity to collagen something one can overcome? Some people can and some people can't. It really does depend. Some people their guts are very irritated, and so collagen doesn't work well for them at that time. But once we actually do work on their guts and their guts are really healed up, they can do just fine with collagen. But some people are just sensitive to it long term, and so unfortunately they can't do it. But honestly, I've never seen someone sensitive to collagen long term. Do you have any tips on getting protein on a budget? Good quality meat can be pricey. Yeah, do research on who's available to you locally. Oftentimes, people are trying to buy good quality meat from big chain grocery stores instead of their local butcher or a local co-op or something like that. So you're always looking for, and I always look for the sale as well. If, for example, Grass-fed ground beef is on sale at my local health food store once a month, and then it goes down to $4.99 a pound. It's normally $8.99 a pound. And so when it's $4.99 a pound, I'm going to buy a lot more than when it's $8.99 a pound. And I kind of keep that in my head, in the back of my mind, and I put money aside for that, or I budget for that. I know that it's going to be on sale. So when we make something a priority and we start to actually track those things, and we make it, I know it can be overwhelming, but it is something that we kind of have to be savvy about in today's world. And then some people have like local butchers. I personally don't, but I have so many clients that have like amazing local farmers that have amazing deals on things. So that's like another thing to kind of think of. But my biggest thing, shop sales, look at Thrive Market, you look at US Wellness Meats. Also look to save money on other things, like if you're buying a lot of packaged or processed foods that are like quote unquote healthy, those will rack up your bills very quickly. And so limit those types of things. Also look at things that you can make. Oftentimes we're buying something for, $7 when we can make it for $2. And so again, like I know it takes a little bit more time, but it's usually better for us. And on top of it, we're actually able to spend or splurge on the meat. So just little kind of like tips that I kind of focus on. And I usually will focus on the things that I can afford. Like for example, Trader Joe's, I don't know if you have a Trader Joe's near you, but their grass-fed ground beef in the freezer section, I think it's $4.99 a pound always. And theirs is from Argentina, which is one of the best places to get your grass-fed beef. So, that's a place to get grass-fed ground beef. And I know grass-fed ground beef gets old, but at least you're having some high quality meat. So just kind of think about those things. And then maybe like supplement, maybe focus on getting protein from dairy for a meal, protein from eggs for a meal, protein from maybe like a protein powder that you can afford from a meal. So maybe just doing meat once a day is something that you can afford. So kind of like sitting down and actually getting real with the numbers and getting familiar with your local, what you have available locally to you is very important, because oftentimes we're kind of being sporadic with our practices. And if we come up with kind of a more consistent way of shopping, we're getting familiar with our local people, our local farmers, or, the local owners of our health food store, or whatever it might be, we're actually really finally getting like, oh, I'm in the know now. I know what's on sale. But I shop sales always. I get emails from every single store in my area telling me what the deal is for that week. And I literally, when I see like, oh, barramundi's on sale, barramundi recipes. Oh, grass-fed ground chuck's on sale. What can I make with grass-fed beef? I'm like starting to really shop sales to save money. Can you overdo it with red light? Yeah, absolutely. You can overdo it with just about anything. So yeah, that's why I usually say like 10 to 20 minutes is a good time to focus on. We don't want to like go crazy with it. Hi Jessica, can really strong antibiotics cause havoc with your hormones and cause PCOS? I already answered this question in depth, so make sure to rewatch this live, and I talk about it. I talked about it a little bit. I bleed. Hi Alyssa, thank you so much. I'm glad that my content can be refreshing to some. I bleed only when I take bioprogesterone. I'm at a healthy weight and do minimal exercise. If I continue with monthly bioprogesterone, will my period eventually come back on its own? I can't answer that for sure because I don't know. I have no idea what your body, what the body's response would be. But that's pretty common for a lot of women, especially if they're both post birth control, if they have like maybe nutrient deficiencies, mineral deficiencies, excess stress on their body, then that's pretty common. But, bioidentical progesterone usually doesn't need to be taken forever. Once the body doesn't need it anymore, the body will ovulate and bleed on its own. Why no salmon, but yes to some other fish and seafood? I don't say like no salmon. I'll have salmon when I want to have salmon, but I wouldn't a lot of people will have salmon every single day and eat tons of salmon. And remember, salmon's a cold water fish, so you'll find that the recommendation is usually shellfish and whitefish, because those are fish that are going to grow in warmer climates. They don't have, they're not as fat filled. They're pretty low fat in comparison with something like a cold water fish like salmon. Keep in mind, guys, what do bears eat to put themselves into hibernation? If you don't know the answer to that question, it's salmon. Salmon is what bears eat to slow their metabolisms to the point where they were so slow in burning fat that it puts the bear to sleep for months and months and months. So, and then when the bear comes out of hibernation, what do they eat? Honey and fruit for like 2 or 3 weeks to get themselves out of the diabetic state they were in when they were hibernating. So remember, cold water, fatty fish are going to have fats that are used to cold, dark places, right? The salmon are in a dark, cold environment, and so when you expose it to the oxygen, light-rich, heat-rich environment that is your body, you can expect those fats to oxidize. That's not to say salmon is bad, it's just to say that we shouldn't be pounding the salmon if we want metabolic health. Is there any protein powder you recommend if casein may give issues and collagen gelatin giving headaches, naked pea or rice? No plant protein, absolutely no. I'm not a big fan of it. It's better to just omit it or go without and do like make, get like non-fat organic milk powder and do foods like milk powder pancakes or stuff like that. But pea protein and rice protein is not really protein, and it's just going to be more irritating over just getting real food sources. Sometimes protein powder just needs to be omitted. It is a convenience that some people just can't tolerate. Been using Temp Drop for almost 2 years now. It only connects to Bluetooth when you sync it after wearing. Highly recommend. Is it better to not eat cruciferous vegetables at all? Personally, I find that a lot of clients just do better not eating fiber for a while if their guts are really wrecked. I do cruciferous vegetables well cooked maybe once every couple of weeks, but some people do a little better with maybe they do once a week or twice a week. But cruciferous vegetables are a manufactured vegetable. They all kind of originated from the same species and the same family of vegetables and were cultivated for as a modern convenience food. They're definitely not an ancient food and have only been around for a little while. Do we need greens and such, or are roots and fruits enough? That's really dependent on the person. I personally do great with very little greens in my diet, and I'm happy to be that way. All right, guys. I am going to end this because Instagram's going to cut me off. See you soon.